This is going to be a quick video. I always say quick and it ends up being 20 minutes long, but this is going to be a quick video on my R.E.M cassette collection. R.E.M was a band that I got into in high school. I was starting to move away from a lot of the classic rock stuff, a little more mainstream pop that I was listening to, Boston, Foreigner, Beatles types of stuff, and I wanted to get more into quote-unquote alternative music, and R.E.M was one of the first bands that I actually got into, and I started listening to them and collecting them on cassette. So that's why I've chosen to start off showing my R.E.M cassette collection. The very first, I wouldn't call it an album, it's actually an EP. This is called Chronic Town, and this has got 5 songs on it. Excellent, just a great rock and roll album. I wouldn't even necessarily label it as alternative, but they're just starting out. They're just kind of finding their sound, but they're a great tight band, and this is a great showcase for them and what was to come. Next album is their classic album, Murmur. This has got their first hit Radio Free Europe on it. It also has Talk About the Passion, Sitting Still, a lot of jangly pop on here, stuff that you weren't really hearing, for that matter, anywhere at this time, or at least I wasn't. A lot of, I want to say, Birds influences with the guitar. Michael Stipe's lyrics are very hard to decipher. He's kind of mumbling in a lot of it, but that was part of the appeal and part of the charm of R.E.M, is it just really didn't sound like anything else on the radio, or for that matter, even in, I think, alternative circles at that time. Their second album was Reckoning, and this has 7 Chinese brothers on it. It has a song called Camera. Another great song on here, Don't Go Back to Rockville. So really a great follow-up to Murmur, and not a huge departure from that sound. It's kind of more of the same. I compare it almost to like Dire Straits' first 2 albums, Murmur and Reckoning. There's just a real stylistic carryover between the two. Third album is, depending on what you prefer, Fables of the Reconstruction or Reconstruction of the Fables. Thought that was a pretty clever way to market or package the album. This has got Can't Get There From Here, which is a great punkish track. Maps and Legends, Driver 8, Kohutek. I don't know if that's how you pronounce it, but I think the band actually almost broke up when they were making this album, just because they were having to follow up 2 really great albums with Murmur and Reckoning. And the sound is a lot different from what you hear on the first 2 albums. They're incorporating more instruments. There's some string arrangements in it. So they weren't going to rest on their laurels. They were going to kind of branch out and experiment a little bit. And I think it's a fantastic album that they came up with. One of their harder edged albums is Life's Rich Pageant, and this was from 1985. This has Begin to Begin. The single off of here was Fall on Me. It's also got Cuyahoga. Flowers of Guatemala is great. What If We Give It Away? One of my favorite all-time R.E.M songs. Swan Swan H, which the opening really sounds a lot like John Lennon's Working Class Hero. And then they do a cover. I'm not sure who did the original, but there's a great cover of a song called Superman. And then they came out with a B-sides and outtakes album, as it were. I think they're mostly B-sides, songs that hadn't appeared on an R.E.M album proper until now. This was Dead Letter Office. It got some interesting stuff on here, some stuff that I think would have really felt right at home, or fit right at home on their first couple of albums. So it's kind of an interesting, especially this early in the career, that they came out with kind of a leftover track compilations, but I really enjoyed it. And I remember just being so anxious for new R.E.M material at that time, because Life's Rich Pageant had been such a great album, and putting that on and thinking, well, this is kind of a neat standalone album, and it would have worked well even if I hadn't known that it was just a bunch of outtakes and B-sides cobbled together. And then finally, a fantastic album, Document, which came out in 1987 with the radio-friendly track, The One I Love, and of course, the world It's the End of the World as We Know It, and I Feel Fine is also on here. Just a great compilation. It's not R.E.M. selling out. It's more the world finally coming to a place where they could appreciate R.E.M. I don't think R.E.M. changed their sound all that much. They were always going to be who they were. But I think the rest of the music listening public finally came to realize that, you know, R.E.M. is actually a great band and one of America's lost treasures. This is a BMG version of the Document album that I picked up just because it was different from what I had. So I just threw this in. It was real cheap for my collection, so I grabbed that. This is the cassette single, and this was for The One I Love. It is sealed, so probably it runs for about $1,000. If you're interested in buying this cassette off of me, leave a comment at the bottom. This has got The One I Love on the A side and a live version of Maps and Legends on the B side. This is the single for the second single off Document. It's The End of the World as We Know It and I Feel Fine. And It's the End of the World is on side A, and a track, it's an instrumental track called Last Date. I believe it's a cover of somebody, is on the flip side. Reckoning was their first true, I don't know if you could call it a greatest hits album. It's not like R.E.M. was lighting up the charts or anything like that, but it's a best of compilation. And this was right after R.E.M. left IRS Records and signed with Warner Brothers. So this was, IRS Records kind of milking the last of R.E.M.'s catalog. And it's a great compilation. It's got all the hits here, but not only that, but they have alternate versions. They've got an early Hibtone single, it's called, of Radio Free Europe. There is an alternate mix of Gardening at Night, which was on the first EP, Chronic Town. And there's a version of Finest Work Song, which has a horn arrangement in it. And then there's a track that was originally on a soundtrack, and the name of it is actually escaping me at the moment. I can't think of it. Romance, which is a great track. Almost sounds like it could have been a brand new R.E.M. track, but it wasn't, but it's a great track nonetheless. So R.E.M. moves over to Warner Brothers, and they release another fantastic album, Green, which also had the hits. Stand was a big hit on here. Pop Song 89 was another single. And Orange Crush was also released as a single, although none of them quite reached the heights that The One I Love or The End of the World as We Know It, but still a fantastic album. Started to experiment more with the mandolin and some softer textures on that album. It does rock a lot, but it's also got some softer moments. And the first time that R.E.M. included lyrics as part of one of their albums for the song World Leader Pretend. That came out in 1988 or 89. I'm forgetting. I think it was 1988. The fall of 1988 is when I got that cassette. And then there was a long break, and it wasn't until 1991 that R.E.M. had their follow-up album, which was Out of Time. They took a break. They were kind of getting burned out, and so they did not tour to support this album, but this album was a hit nonetheless. It's got Losing My Religion on it. I think Radio Song is a great track, although it was kind of controversial because they had KRS-One, the rapper who was featured on that track. Shiny Happy People with Kate Pearson sharing lead vocals with Michael Stipe was sort of a departure, and there were already cries of like, you're selling out, you're going soft. And so I think it's still a great album. There's actually, if anybody is interested in Nick Drake, Peter Buck was a huge Nick Drake fan, and the song Endgame sounds like a lost Nick Drake instrumental track. Really enjoy the heck out of that. Then they followed that up with Automatic for the People, another fantastic album. This, of course, had Drive on it, Man on the Moon, Everybody Hurts, just such a great collection of songs. And it seemed like R.E.M. could do no wrong at this point. They just kept putting out classic album after classic album, and that one was no exception. So that was 93, or yeah, I'm pretty sure it was 93. And then R.E.M. finally, to kind of silence the critics that you guys are going soft and you guys have lost your hard rock edge, came out with Monster. Not my favorite R.E.M. album. It is pretty heavy from start to finish. There aren't a whole lot of light moments on here. Tongue is a pretty cool, laid-back track on here. But for the most part, it rocks pretty hard. It's right in the middle of the grunge movement. And so everybody was trying to, you know, get into that harder-edged, grungy, alternative sound. And I think R.E.M. did it with mixed results. It's not a bad album. It's not my favorite, though. And this is when I think R.E.M. started to kind of lose the plot a little bit, started to move away from some of their alternative roots, less acoustic stuff, less jangly pop on here. Michael Stipe's lyrics seem to get a little less obtuse and a little, I don't want to call it pedestrian, but, you know, it had a little more straightforward songwriting style that I wasn't too crazy about. And so the next and last album that I have on cassette from R.E.M. was after Bill Berry, their drummer, left the band, and this was Up. I was actually shocked I found this because I think it's mostly available in Europe. Got this for like $3 at a record store near my house, so I snatched it up and I was really happy. I had it on CD. Didn't think I'd ever find it on cassette, but here it is. This is an okay album. It's like them trying to, you know, it was right after Radiohead's Kid A had come out, and so they were just trying to play with their sound, I think defy expectations, sort of reinvent themselves as a three-piece band, and I think it's okay. I really love the Beach Boys pastiche that they do here on At My Most Beautiful, and there's another song on here called Parakeet that is also, I feel, sounds a lot like the late 60s Beach Boys. So there's some stuff that's great on here, some stuff that I don't necessarily care for. I think that's that great, but nonetheless, you know, it's fine. It's R.E.M. And then after this, there's not a whole lot in R.E.M.'s catalog that I really care for all that much. So this is my R.E.M. cassette collection. I said I'd keep it brief, so hopefully I accomplished that. And I don't expect a whole lot of people to watch this video, to be quite honest with you. Not only because not a whole lot of people watch my videos anyway, but I don't think there's a whole lot of R.E.M. fans anymore out there. It seems like there's not a huge underground R.E.M. fan cult, and I could be wrong. Maybe I'm just looking at the wrong places on the internet, but nonetheless, if you're an R.E.M. fan, hopefully you enjoyed this video. If you want to comment, feel free. And as always, thanks for watching.